So if you're not pivoting, you're probably not doing it right. I think people want to use AI, but they don't know which one to use. All it is just trying to find a problem that people really want you to solve. And I think a lot of people will build a solution instead of find a problem and try to sell that solution.
Okay, awesome. Well, it's great to have you on. Nick, maybe you can give a quick intro of who you are, and then
Yeah.
we could start take it from there.
My background is in design, and I've used design to build companies for the last 12 years. Um, I got a really cool degree from Cornell that focused on human-centric design. So I examined the human with products, interiors, and buildings, and kind of how a human being is affected by all of those different types of design and vice versa. And then got the entrepreneurial bug in grad school and decided to start a company. Didn't work out, but I learned a lot in the process, and then kind of became a number two for a couple of years at other startups. I was the first hired a couple of startups that taught me a lot. And then one of the companies I joined asked me to be a co-founder, and we went through 4 pivots together, pretty rocky time, but found some product market fit in 2018. Partially because of the funding that our security token was able to give us. And that company's doing really well now. And just after that, I started an agency focused on product market fit. So I've just kind of been a student of product market fit and pivoting for the last 10 years, and now advise founders on that process, specifically playing a largely design focused role.
Got it. So it sounds like you're like a design expert, and you went through 4 pivots in your last startup, so that's quite a bit. I mean,
It
in your
is.
startups, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it's more common than we realize, I think, or maybe founders aren't as vocal about it as I am. But the whole process of like pre-seed stage, or just like 0 to 1, is iteration. So if you're not pivoting, you're probably not doing it right. And I was fortunate enough to get through a couple of those cycles to a point where I identified like how much customer research we need to do, how much we need to spend on a rebrand or a new website, or how to set up new analytic endpoints on a completely different platform, how to lead development teams and stuff like that. So was able to identify patterns over the years, and now share those with the founders that I'm advising.
So I guess just talk me through like one pivot. Like your team is small. I'm assuming you had one co-founder or two, or
Yeah, there's 3 co-founders.
3. Okay.
And at the time, I think I was brought on, we were a team of like 6 or so, and then grew up and down in the range of 20. And then once we found fit, grew to like 50. I think maybe they're 50 or 80 now.
Oh, wow.
And as they started to scale, I realized I love the 0 to 1 stuff. And from a personal, more capitalist perspective, I could get exposure to a lot more cap tables at a lower valuation than if I get involved with Series B or Series C companies. And so not only am I having fun, but I feel like, in the next 5 years, a lot of those investments will really pay off.
So one of the questions that I actually had was about product market fit, right? Because we were just going through your website, and I was super curious because you just shared about your pivoting journey. So why do you think product market fit is super important, and why is this word thrown around everywhere in the startup ecosystem, PMF, PMS? Can you expand on that? I'm super curious to hear from you, because you're on multiple cap tables as advisors. You built so many startups, and I really want to hear from you. Like, what does PMF mean?
I think PMF is just it's just a slogan for an effort, a banner for founders to fly early on. It should be something that is instinctual, because all it is just trying to find a problem that people really want you to solve. That's it. And I think a lot of people will build a solution instead of find a problem and try to sell that solution. A lot of people will identify a problem, but not enough people have it. Or maybe that problem isn't felt severely enough or frequently enough. And so we misgauge products and if they're wanted or needed in the world. And PMF is the kind of the art of gauging whether or not it's big enough, whether or not you can build a business around this particular problem. I think there's a lot more problems than there are markets. And so finding the place where those two things overlap is really difficult. And in my experience, it was the single most valuable skill for me to have, because ideas and problems are not in short supply. It's defining which one is worth your time and energy and capital and reputation.
For me, it's really hard to tell what's going to be a good company and what's not. I really, even
Yeah,
in
you have to test it. Exactly. You can't just look at something and figure out if it's a good idea. You have to put it through a series of tests.
I think just at a base level, I think there's like three things that I think might be most important, and then the rest you figure out, which is founding team has to be good. So maybe you could talk through like, why did you pick the founding teams you had? They have to have runway. If they don't have runway, that's bad. And then I think the third is product, which I think, that's where you're really keen.
Yeah.
How do you pick the founders, first of all, that you work with?
Yeah. I think the founding team is critical for sure. Founding teams can change as they did with me. And that's also more common than I think folks really realize. So founder market fit is a whole another acronym for us, maybe another episode, but it's not the most critical, I feel like, maybe, and we can debate this if you'd like, Daniel. Like, a good founding team is a good place to start, but like, you can remove founders can lose interest, founders can be replaced by executives. And so I think to start, you want to find someone that you personally can work well with. And I was able to really find a strong chemistry with my co-founders. Dan Avias is a genius in regards to marketing and assembling teams. And Kieran, his partner and CTO, is just a polyglot and super curious, and will learn any new tech stack, and will look at a problem and never say no. And those are the kinds of qualities you want to have in your teammates. And I think I complimented them well, because I was able to really stay focused on the end user experience while the others were growing users and acquiring users, or making sure that the platform didn't crash, or was servicing those users reliably. And I think that trio, actually, like product, sales and marketing, and technology, are that's a really powerful combination for a software.
Got it. So you're talking about sales. I didn't bring up sales, so I guess it sounds like sales. Like, does one of the founders have to be a salesperson? Like, or do you look for that, or do you look for more technical aptitude when talking to founders?
I'd say that if you want to build a company without taking on a lot of external capital quickly, you better be replacing one of the more costly roles, right? So if you're a CTO and a founder, you're replacing the developer cost largely in the first days. If you're a salesperson, you're replacing the cost of the saleswoman. That is going to drastically reduce potential cost. And design these days is another one of those big line items. And so I think you don't need all of those, right? But you probably need one, and you need to find and identify people that can complement the others. What I found is, let's say, like scientists who start a company, or engineers, like product engineers that physical product engineers that start companies, don't have some of these core roles to like grow a business. They have the market understanding, and they have a way to translate it. They have maybe a network that they can help connect a salesperson to, but they don't know how to close the sale themselves. Maybe so those are the folks that I found kind of struggle the most and need those counterpart earliest, and sometimes struggling that 0 to 1 phase longer than others because they don't have one of those critical skill sets.
Do you need a strong opinion as a product leader? Like, because you're trying things, like, is there an approach that you take, either really creative, like an open white space, or are you just like, let's try this, I'm all in on this one idea, and you try it for a certain period? Like, what, as a product leader, you only have so many engineering cycles.
Yes.
So you're picking and choosing. Like, what is going through those 4 pivots? Maybe it's not a pivot. Maybe it was a layer of like an onion. I don't know. You're layering in different products on top of
It did. It refined. It was kind of like a funnel that building on, or maybe even a triangle, building on the or a pyramid, building on the insights from previous companies for sure. I think you need conviction, but I want to decouple conviction with opinion. And this is something I debate a lot with my founders is the role of intuition, gut instinct, and opinion, and how that needs to be paired with data. And I think too often CEOs and leaders in general are given or are obligated or feel like they're forced to have a strong opinion in one direction or the other. And I think that that's good. That's necessary as a leader. That's kind of your job. One of the roles that you have to play is you have to decide. But making a decision is different than having an opinion. And I feel like one of the roles that I bring to executive teams is helping them balance that level of gut with some level of data. So if they are all gut and no data, I'm like, you guys need to be surveying your customers and interviewing your customers and doing it this way so that you could actually gather insight to present at board meetings or product strategy meetings or whatever it is. If it's the opposite, you are just listening to customers all day and doing what they tell you and adding features to the backlog, not using your intuition to kind of dream big and be more visionary, then you need to add that. And so it's really a balance between the two as you work through any given product. But I would say that the effort and mission for a product leader, for a CEO or an executive, is make sure that you're balanced.
So one question that I have is actually about the initial phase of the startup. And because JustPaid is also a YC-based startup, I've actually, been consuming a lot of YC content. Yeah. And one thing that they actually mention is do things that don't scale. Like in the beginning of things, when you're just starting off, you have to be really scrappy. You just DM people, you try to get your first users. I don't know how, you just get your first users, listen to them, take that feedback. But as a product founder, like what's your perspective on this, on, doing things that don't scale? And also, how do you balance that, intuition that you also mentioned?
The motivation behind that advice, another great slogan, do things that don't scale, is to reduce risk, right? When you spend $20,000 on a piece of software and no one wants to use it, you fucked up. Doing things that don't scale saves you money so you can iterate faster. Designing a prototype and testing that on people, that doesn't scale, but you didn't spend much more than a few $100s on that prototype probably. So that lets you scale, right? Keeping your burn low. The motivation behind that is more important because it sounds disheartening. You're like, no, I want to scale. I want to do things at scale. Let's do that. Like more scale, more money, more customers. Yeah. But when you first start with something, you have to kind of make it a duct tape and toothpick type of device. Like you need to put something together that's scrappy, but feels real enough to elicit realistic feedback. And I'm a big believer in that for sure. I'm working with a company right now where we're just going to be doing manual work. And we're actually lucky in today's day and age to, like, there's Mechanical Turk, there's Fiverr, there's all of these things that allow us to do manual work at a lower cost. And so if you can scale with those types of strategies, understand them, you can turn manual things into software a lot better, and you can validate that those features are necessary for your either internal team or your customer, and build with more confidence and conviction that way. So I'm a huge believer in do things that don't scale for sure. It maximizes learning and reduces burn.
So, would you actually like expand on like Mechanical Turk that you mentioned? Are you like referring to Amazon Mechanical Turk?
Yeah.
Just scaling using the platform? Like, what
Yeah.
exactly do you
Just
mean
using
there? If you could
people.
just double.
Just using people. Like if you're doing something that's manual and you're like copying and pasting something from one spreadsheet to another, you can even use AI for these things or Zapier. Like there's just a lot. We're really fortunate as founders to follow that advice now, because that advice was given 10 years ago, when YC started. So today it's way easier to fulfill that obligation as a founder than it was when I think it was first given.
Have you used Mechanical Turk? Like, I've never used it. So, like, say that there's a kind of a complex task, like an invoice. We're just paid to basically take invoices, and you have to read them and you have to understand it. Like for Mechanical Turk, would is it very very like very basic tasks, or have you seen like more complexity from it?
I think it ranges and it based on the amount that you're willing to pay the person, um, often based on the amount of time it takes to complete that task. But early on, you have two costs. You have the cost of the actual service getting done, but then you also have the cost of learning. And if it takes you 3 months to develop something that you could do manually, you're waiting 3 months to learn. And that's a very high cost in the startup world. So the idea is you are learning faster by doing it manually and reducing the overall dev cost potentially in the engineering. Because I guess there's a third cost, which is the architecture and actual development of the software solution 6, 9, 12 months after your manual intervention. And you can use those dollars so much more appropriately because you validated that workflow already. So there's doing things manually at first really does pay dividends over time.
Don't build the software. Don't be impulsive. Build it. Like sometimes it's just like doing the work without actually having your engineering resources cycle through that, where
Yeah,
they could do something in a day versus the engineers working a week or 2 weeks on it.
exactly. Exactly. And if you are doing the calculations, like, well, it's going to take me 30 hours a week to do this fucking, this task. Okay, do it yourself for 10 of those hours. That's enough for you to learn how easy it is or make a little, you know, instruction manual on how to do it for someone else. Then they do it for another 10 hours and you find some issues, in that process and 30 hours. And so you've just spent maybe a week learning the entire workflow, figuring out and architecting a way to fulfill that service without you being involved, and are now set up to learn from that workflow and deliver that service at a larger scale, maybe not at the scale we're dreaming of that software can create. But I mean, ultimately what we're doing with software is replacing people. So just like architecting with people is just a very effective way of architecting software.
I actually have this question about the product itself, right? Because right now it's becoming so easy to build products because, I mean, to be honest, like I've been in the product calls at Just Paid, and we actually use like Shared CN UI, which is like the slickest, clean UI that's going around in the product world right now, and which is also by Versal, right? So Versal just launched this platform called v0.dev, and now there's a competitor for that, which is bolt.new. So basically these platforms are, you can just put a screenshot in and then it replicates the whole product by itself. And then all you have to do is just copy paste those files in your IDE and then just build the product. And it's becoming so easy to build the product, get the first iteration out, and then just, ship it and then get feedback and all of that. But
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, what do you think of this whole cycle, this entire new cycle, which is being disrupted?
I think it's great. If it increases speed, that means it increases innovation and improved innovation. And I think that's just incredible for the industry at large and for the world, because then we'll be able to try new things a lot faster. Even before some of these, you had Bubble and Webflow and, more manual interventions that I think are going to stick around for a little while. And now reverse engineering someone else's work, but that's not that novel, right? Like you could, as a human being, use Balsamic, a 10-year-old tool or even more, to look at someone else's UI and just copy that and understand how it would work and then give that to a developer and use the first one as a reference. Like, right, it was possible to do the same workflow before. Now it just happens a little bit faster and a little bit cheaper. But I haven't seen the quality output so far. You need a human, you need a designer involved to audit the output. And so, I hope that gives us some job security out here in the product design development world. It's increasing speed of iteration, and that's one of the greatest markers of success, as Sam Altman said when he was president of YC. One of the biggest indicators of success is the rate of iteration for an early stage company. So he's literally helped allow for that reality to come true, which I feel like is so meta. No pun intended.
How do you allow for that rate of innovation to happen fast? Like, it sounds like it happens, you like the early stages of a company because I guess there's so much white space and they're iterating as fast as possible and there's not a lot of users. How do you keep the team like moving fast? And I'll throw another question at you. So it's a two-part question. In person versus remote, like how do you deal with both to create that innovation cycle on the product side?
What we're talking about with iteration is momentum and certainty. You want to build more momentum and you want to have more certainty. That's what good iteration cycles allow for. And so to make room for certainty, you have to reduce the amount of ego in the room, I think. And so one of the first hallmarks of a good leadership team is a group of people that are open to being proven wrong, and are open for ideas to come from the ground up, which is, I think, a culture that we're really lucky to have in the United States and Canada and other areas. Once you have that sense of or that reduced ego, that curiosity, I think you can move into a testing phase where you throw ideas out there and we all, kind of decide on what it is that we want to test or we want to iterate on. And the second thing is the momentum component, which is really about, it's a collaborative effort. You need to basically make sure you've got a lot of customers to talk to all the time, like, or at least once a month, once a quarter, maybe a little more than once a quarter. So that you then know what to do with those customers. You schedule the interviews these days every week. You schedule the interviews these days every week. The interviews go like this. The first 30 minutes are spent talking about their habits and their anxieties and their daily routine. And the second half of the interview is focused on a prototype and some sort of walkthrough. And then after that, those interviews are done. You've done 6 to 10 of those interviews. You synthesize them in this way. That documentation can be found here in OneDrive or whatever for people to reference in the future. And then the output is like a synthesized document that influences sales, marketing, whatever, and product. And you're reviewing that document on a monthly or quarterly basis, however often your engine is pumping out insights. Keep that engine going. That's I think the thing that differentiates really strong companies from the ones that are moving slower, is that they have a really strong rate of iteration. They have this engine going in the background that doesn't really require much air and fuel. It's just more automatic. And that's laid in the culture of the organization, like I was saying, based on the leadership, their level of ego and their interest in experimentation and autonomy, allowing the rest of their team to kind of surface new ideas, go off and do that research, trust them to ask the right questions, and get insights that affect the entire company. So that's kind of how I would describe or summarize a healthy iterative culture.
There's this whole trend of founder mode. Founder mode to me sounds like ego mode in a way. Like, it's like the founder has a vision. They kind of like know what needs to get fixed. They kind of just look like hyper focus the team. You're kind of saying the antithesis of that. I don't know if that's the right word, but you're saying like, be more creative and open-minded versus founder mode, which is hyper, I know what's right.
Yeah.
Mode. Like,
yeah.
Is that right? Like, is that the right way to think about it? Like,
I don't know. I mean, I guess we're interpreting founder mode in one way. I'm interpreting it similar to you. I think it's like, go out, do it all yourself, close deals. That's what founder mode means to me.
Is that what it means? Like, so to you, it's do it all yourself. So that does mean like still be creative, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is maybe a seasoning on founder mode, like how you do founder mode as personally. But founder mode to me means when I have my clickable prototype or I have something to show a customer and I want to get their feedback, I'm not answering their question. I'm not selling them on the benefits of this thing. I'm taking a posture of curiosity, right? I'm just writing a post today that the Socratic method is like the easiest way to improve your interviews as a founder. Because I found that CEOs and founders oftentimes will sell their product during customer interviews instead of learn about their customer. And when you're showing someone something, a prototype or something visual, and they ask you, oh, like, should I click here? Or is this the right button? Is this what you mean by this? You don't answer the question. You ask the question back. You say, is that what it seems like? Or what would you expect to happen there? And that small change changes the tone of the conversation, increases the amount of insights you're gathering. And I feel like it services the most painful point within that experience. So, and it allows them to articulate why they feel like it's painful. So, I think founder mode means different things to different people, but I would say the founder mode when I do it, it means staying curious. And yeah, trying to reduce my ego a little bit. But like I was saying before, you need a dose of ego and delusion, or else we wouldn't be founders. We wouldn't have the appetite for risk and the interest in changing some status quo.
I think I read somewhere on Twitter that like Brian Chesky, the founder of Airbnb, was in a situation where like he was listening to his executives and it wasn't going well. And then he went into founder mode and he kind of just said, I'm going to take the reins and run it this way. And it fixed a lot of stuff internally. I could be totally wrong about this and be misinterpreting it because I didn't really dig too much. But at a high level, I was hearing that as like trusting his gut on what the company is, because he did build it from nothing and he did make it this huge multi-billion-dollar company. So he does know a lot of like where it needs to go.
Yeah.
But, there are a lot of smart people in the room that have a lot of egos and a lot of personalities. Like, what's the right approach for you? Founder modes, stay creative and open-minded as a founder is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But
sounds like he was in CEO mode because founders don't have executives to quarrel with usually. Okay. And he was in kind of a noisy room, which I totally understand. You need to kind of quiet the noise. But I would also like to add that Brian Chesky is probably one of the most notable designers who founded a company. And his mindset, I'm sure, resembles mine in the fact that he wants to see proof that that's a good decision versus just shooting from the hip all the time. And the ironic thing about shooting from the hip and using your gut is that you need a track record of that going well for everyone. No one's going to trust someone's gut if it has failed them in the past. You need that gut to be proving itself over time. And that's just yet, ironically, another data point. All in all, you need data to be making decisions in a really believable way. And I think Brian Chesky is certainly a good example of his track record serving him. And so I'm sure he was making the right decision in this, but I'm a little biased. I'm a big fan of Brian Chesky.
I actually have this unique question for both of you, actually, because from what I'm hearing from you guys is that there is a certain kind of, delusion, this certain kind of muscle that you got to have, and this characteristic to be a founder, right? And Daniel has also, built a previous startup and exited that. And now you also work with multiple startups. So is there a certain muscle that I can replicate? Because, let's say Daniel has gone through so many steps. You've gone through so many steps. And me being a first-time founder, not going through all these steps, can I still replicate that? Is it even possible to do that? Or should I have to go through the entire process to build that muscle?
I'm curious your thoughts, Daniel. I've got something in mind, but you've been hearing a lot from me.
I think every company is built differently, and I don't think there's a one size fits all answer.
I agree. Yeah, unfortunately.
I think people say that this is the way a company needs to be built because this is the way I was successful. I don't think that always works. Like for any company in that moment in time, they were able to capitalize on like a situation and their team was the right team and they had the right chemistry and the right momentum at that moment. And I'll use Netflix as an example. Like today, if a Netflix came around, I think they would struggle to become what they became. I think because they had competitors like Blockbuster, which were really fumbling a lot. They weren't quite fumbling, but what happened was at Blockbuster, they fired like the believers in online, like streaming videos. And like that allowed the Netflix team to really capitalize on a weakness that everyone else out there in like the internet was like not understanding. So like,
Oh my
can
God. I didn't know that, Daniel. That answers so many questions I had about Blockbuster. I'm so glad that I know that.
uh, Blockbuster actually could have, if they didn't fire their CEO, the CEO was very well. They didn't fire him. He didn't like. They didn't give him the comp package.
Resource and well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they didn't give him what he wanted.
Yeah.
So he just left, and that basically he walked out the door, and the whole streaming business like kind of just fell apart because I think they hired brick and mortar people like for physical stores to like run it, and the Blockbuster people like just lost their momentum in online.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who knew online would be that big? Like if everybody
Fucking Reed
knew,
Hoffman. Like,
yeah,
you know, they stopped talking to their customer, I think, and they stopped like doing market analysis on trends like, you know, bandwidth increases and how that was going to increase exponentially over the next 10 years. And so what seems like a hurdle now will be gone in 5 years. You know, it's like they, I'm sure that there's been some interesting postmortems on Blockbuster, but that's why I like what I do, because it's just as important at the beginning of the company as it is in the middle or and towards the end of the company. And I've even had the privilege of working with a couple of family offices and PE firms to evaluate purchasing a business. And you can see when it's about to exit, like they need to know that there are 4 or 5 strategies to optimize that company's internal organization and operations, or find new markets for them to go into. And if a company doesn't have that capacity or resource or mindset, then it leaves room for other people to capitalize on. I feel like that's what I want to Blockbuster.
I don't know if that answered your question, Harshit, but I think there's no right answer, for any company. I think it's just taking those steps. I do think at the base level, it's like founder dynamics are important. Runway, how much money you have in the bank is important. And then there's there's luck, there's a component of luck, right time, right place. Like if you were to start, a crypto business now, can you become as big as Coinbase? Maybe. But because Coinbase started when they did, it allowed them
Exactly. Timing.
Yeah, there was
And where they were located. Now they're in the Bay Area when they started. There's so many things that affect it. I would say that one of the skills that you have control over is like just interviewing people and asking good questions, because that's ultimately the thing that surfaces the right problem for you. So that's where I have focused my career, and that's why I would answer the question that way. The more universal personality trait is one of grit, that you're willing to run up against the wall 6 times before it moves and not get too discouraged. And so, yeah, let's leave it there. I don't want to get too philosophical because it is a difficult question to ask. You're right, Daniel.
Got it. And would hiring a Nick McEvily would help? Like, can I just hire like a fractional leader and then just have then give me all their insights? I mean, you being a fractional leader, like what would companies expect you to do? Like, what are your insights there, and how does that happen?
Sure. Yeah. A company will hire me to do one of two things. Set up their product organization. So like let's say they have like maybe a UX designer, junior designer, or like a head of sales and like 10 developers, but no product manager. I'll come in, I'll hire that product manager, I'll set up the processes, maybe hire a full-time UX designer, kind of set up their team and the process to deliver strong product. the folks that don't have revenue and don't have product teams, they'll hire me as one of their first product resources, usually making a prototype, putting together some wireframes and mock-ups of the first ideas, interviewing the customers, and they'll oftentimes be in a sidecar with me, watching me do that interview, take notes, understand the best practices so that then they can do it themselves. And so like just a month or two with me will deliver oftentimes a founder a lifetime of, benefit. I think, Dana, this is your second startup now. And this will, I've done 2 or 3 now. And I swear the most important quality that I learned was how to talk to a user. I was like, I just want to be really good at that. If I know how to do that, then I'll be able to find the next thing for me to work on. And it turned out that was a skill that other people either had a deficit in or put value on. And that's kind of what I'm doing these days. I'm lucky if a founder observes me, doing my thing and then replicates it. That's an honor. But sometimes they've got other things to do. So they'll just keep running research programs for them, but making sure that we're staying in touch with the core user problem.
If you say we're doing a startup and you were, funded and you had like, I don't know, $20 million, $30 million, $50 million, $5 million, whatever it is, like what space would you go into and what excites you as a product leader these days where you feel like there's like a big opportunity?
Something that's been on my mind these days is it related to AI. And I know it's going to be relevant to you and to your listeners. I would probably build an AI outfitter. I think people want to use AI, but they don't know which one to use. Once they figure out which AI to use, they don't know how to kind of tailor it to their need or their product or company dynamic. And then once they've got that set up, they need someone to kind of like connect it to some other AI stuff that some other department is doing, and a place to centralize all of that so they can, track and do some project management on the work that AI is now, the labor, that has been replaced by the AI. So I think that there's a real interesting opportunity out there for like an outfitter and an agency model and I'm already paying them personally. So I can attest to the customer that once you help someone build an AI for you and it's outfitted properly and linked up to all of your stuff, you've got them. You've got them for like $100 a month or whatever the subscription price is, because you've just created like a near sentient being and worker that you're paying like $100, it's a fraction of the living cost. And it totally makes sense that you got great lifetime value for someone. You're starting to make money out of the gate. You're using existing technology. Your startup costs are super low. So that's been curious for me. I think that might be an interesting place for folks to spend some time.
What would be like a good vertical? So you're saying like a virtual worker that plugs in and does specific tasks. Is that right?
It's someone it's a human in my mind, but feel free to iterate on this here, Daniel. It's a human being that does a phone call with someone, a business, and listens to them, ask them some questions about like, are you using Gmail? Are you using Microsoft? Or you do have a chat? You ask all about their tool stack and their software processes. You ask about the workflows between departments, and they do kind of an audit and needs analysis, and then identify places where AI can replace people or make existing functions more efficient, and then help configure those systems for you, integrate them into your existing workflows, tools, workforce, and then help you monitor and maintain those over time. I think AI kind of like when it got sold to us, it got sold as like a self-service thing. And that's just not the case right now, unfortunately. And so you need a human being, an expert to help you through that process. And I think that's going to grow significantly in the next 5 years until AI truly fulfills its promise around self-service.
So it's very interesting that you actually are talking about the agency model with all the depth of product that you have, because one thing that I've seen is on Twitter and a lot of these AI startups recently is that I think products right now have just become like content. And what I mean by that is that they just come up, they're super good at it. They launch an API and they are just there for like 6 months and then another product comes in. So that's what was, just going on Twitter for the last 6 months. And the iteration and, the process of the length of the startup has become so short And now I think the value accrual is in where a person can use all these existing AI technologies and then give a larger output for a company. Is that what you're trying to do here? Because I really believe that a human has to be involved and someone who understands the whole tech and then use that as Lego blocks and then give a large outcome to the startup.
Yeah, I think that reinforces actually my career decision. You need a commander of the agents who knows what direction to direct everyone in. And the only way you can do that is by listening to your customer segment well. And there's even AIs for customer research and product ideation. So nothing is safe, um, except I feel like the commander of the fleet. And so be a better commander is kind of what I'm saying. And when you can't be, you have to hire that out to someone.
Where do you see, when you brought up AI, like where do you see it in like 5, 10 years? Is it
No idea.
no idea? Really?
I have no idea. No, it's iterating faster, growing and spreading faster than anything we've ever seen in the technology sector, which already was like exponents more than products and services in the past. So I really have like 5, 10 year horizon is just like unseeable. I wouldn't believe anyone who posited a guess at that. But maybe in the next 2 years, I think I would say it's this outfitter thing. It's like AI is going to be deployed on everything. And so, and there's going to be multiple options within that sector. So like, let's say one of the most popular right now is an AI sales development representative or an SDR. And for those who are familiar with that role, it's someone who goes out and sources deals for a sales executive or someone who can close the deal. And that's being done a lot by AI. It's outreach, it's prospecting, it's pretty mundane stuff that I'm pretty sure any SDR doesn't enjoy and is super up for grab. And there's 100 AI SDRs out there. So how do you know which of them is best? Like, sure, you could read a blog post that ranks them that's probably written by AI that's, paid by. So I think, to connect this actually to your interest, Harsha, is that AI are going to start to communicate with each other in a very automated fashion and trade value. And I think the only way to do that is through cryptocurrency and blockchain. And so I think the next big wave in blockchain and cryptocurrency is going to be automated ledger-based transactions between AI. And then what's going to happen there is like you go from 0 transactions or like thousands of transactions on a particular network to millions a day. You know what I mean? And that cryptocurrency's value is going to just dramatically increase. So I think that there's some interest. There's a layering of the last like 3 big tech waves that are going to nest and be fueled into AI. And 5, 10 years from now, we're just not even going to recognize a lot of this stuff. Like, I don't even think we're going to be having conversations on Zoom in front of a computer anymore. I'm going to be in a much more natural position. I'm going to be looking at you guys more in a spatial sense. We're going to feel a lot more in person than just like a box on a screen. And like, what does that change? All this sort of stuff. So it's really hard to answer that question. I wish I could answer it better. Do you have some thoughts being in the industry?
I mean, I had the opportunity to talk to Emmett Shear, who was at Twitch, and he knows a lot of the people at OpenAI. I spoke to him about a couple of days ago, and he had a really interesting way about this, where he was talking about it's going to be way more heterogeneous in a sense. Like, it's not going to be like the big guys per se. I honestly, I have the same answer as you. It's moving so fast, I don't know. But, there's 2 camps. There's the big guys are going to run everything, meaning like, Meta and Amazon and all these other guys are going to like put all this money into the infrastructure. But the reality is it going to be just one big AI, or is there going to be many little AIs? I don't really have an answer for that, but I feel like in the startup world, I do think a lot of little AIs make a lot of sense because a lot of startups could build 90 different SDR products. And if those SDR products all talk to each other, they're all going to learn from each other, which is insane. Like if this one's doing like,
Well, this becomes a safety concern. I feel like at some point, like if we had a consolidation of AI, like I think the government would have to get involved. And like there's public safety concerns around some of this stuff that is at the root of like the Elon Musk Sam Altman conflict. You know, it's like this. So I hope that that's the case, that it remains more fractured, potentially for safety reasons. Not getting too sci-fi here, but that's kind of where my mind goes.
so you think that the AIs talking to each other could be problematic in a sense?
Yeah, I think it could be replication, um, like you said, learning from each other. AI is black box. We don't know what's going on. So I don't know. Like that certainly makes me a little nervous.
That's a concern, right? If it's learning systems faster than us, if it's learning to exploit things and that sort of thing, I think there's something there.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
For some
Same.
reason,
I don't know. I think learning and understanding is okay, but doing is a separate thing. So having it have like autonomy in its actions, I think is really scary, and I think that's a very thin veil. But certainly not an expert here. And you know, I'm more in your camp here, hardship, but like, what does the interface look like that outputs this stuff? I think there's like visuals, like AI right now is very two dimensional. It's in a chat, and there's a whole world that should exist for us to interact with that. Just maybe just through audio, maybe it's just video, maybe it's a combination of all of these things. And how does the input of our guidance impact output? I'm fascinated about that, and I'm exploring that with a couple of clients right now. But it's going to follow the same hallmark, I think, as any good design, which is you don't see it. If it's working well, you won't notice it. And I think that that's really the next frontier. I think they've done a great job of making it feel native, like the first version of AI being chat focused. That's a very native and natural thing for us to do. We message each other all the time, human to human. So I think it's a beautiful, elegant deployment, but I'm super excited about the next chapter of the AI interfaces.
we are up at the top of the hour, so I wanted to thank you, Nick. This was great having you on.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Thank you, Arshad. Thanks, Daniel.